Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, I have two announcements. The first, happy birthday Laurie. I hope you have a wonderful, or had a wonderful day. Secondly, my friend Being Scared has released a movie. It's a spiritual sequel, shall we say, of Scream. It was actually filmed in the original house. He's put a lot of time, energy, and money into making this film, and it would really mean a lot to me and him if you would go and check it out. I've left the link at the top of the description for your consideration. Thanks, guys. But without further ado, it's time to feel uncomfortable. Lock your doors and let the darkness take control. This happened a while ago. To give you some context, I'm a male in my mid-20s, and at the time lived at home with my parents. We lived in a bigger than average house with a furnished basement apartment in a safe city in Canada. I lived in said basement apartment, while my parents lived on the top floor, the third story. Hearing noises and sounds from upstairs, mainly footsteps or doors opening and closing, is not unusual at all if you happen to live in the basement. When my younger siblings come home from college, these noises can be heard late into the night, at 2 or 3 a.m. even. My younger sibling would sometimes have a car with him, so you could hear the garage door open at odd hours as he would park his car inside. Needless to say, hearing noises while sleeping was never a cause for concern for me, and I had simply become used to it. But during the Christmas period a few years back, over the course of a few nights, I experienced strange occurrences that were downright mysterious, eerily creepy, and borderline paranormal. My parents had flown south to a Mexican resort to get away from the cold, and my younger brother decided to stay at his college town to party with his roommates. I was alone in the house for at least a week, until my parents returned, which wasn't really a problem for me. On the first night, I came home from a buddy's place at 11 p.m., watched a bit of TV, then decided it was time for bed. Before heading down to my room in the basement, I armed the security system, which, short of a security camera, was quite thorough. If anyone were to open any of the doors or windows of the house, a loud alarm would go off. The only way to disarm it is through an app. But if the alarm continued ringing for over a minute, the cops would be notified. I jumped into bed, and after a bit of Instagramming, I dozed off. A few hours later into my sleep, I was awoken by the loud sound of the garage door opening. Strange, I thought, because as I said before, no one was home or due home for a week. 30 seconds later, I heard another loud sound. This was of the garage door closing. At that moment, I thought nothing of it. Just maybe thought that my brother decided to drive home earlier than planned. Still, I tried to stay up and hear who it was that arrived home, or to see if the alarm would go off. After 30 more seconds of waiting, sleepy me decides that it's probably just my brother, who parked his car in the garage and is now taking his time to come inside, probably smoking a cigarette or something. I doze back to sleep, and nothing strange happens for the rest of the night. When I woke up, I went upstairs next morning, and there was no sign of my brother. No sign of any forced entry. The security system hadn't been triggered, and everything looked good. I even called my brother to see if he came home at all last night. He hadn't. Even the garage was empty, and didn't look like anything had been taken. I shrugged it off as me imagining things, sleep paralysis, or just a really vivid dream, and went to work for the day. The next night, I had the same routine as before. After work, I hung out with some friends, came home, armed the security system, and went to bed. I was sleeping peacefully, having even forgotten about the events of the previous night, when all of a sudden, I'm woken up by the loud sound of the garage door opening. I sat up in bed, trying to make sense of what the hell is going on, and then decided it was worth exploring. I grabbed my baseball bat and jacket and head upstairs. As I exit the main door, locking it behind me, and make my way to the garage, a sense of fear comes over me. The garage door is indeed open, and the light inside has been switched on. However, no one is in sight. I pinched myself, almost in disbelief, trying to make sure that I'm actually awake, then decide to walk around the house just to make sure everything is alright. It's 2:30 a.m. at this point, and the neighborhood is eerily quiet. My footsteps in the snow seem to be quite loud, but oddly enough, the neighbor's dog, who just about barks at anything that moves, has been quiet this whole time. As I proceeded to the backyard, the motion light turns on, and what I see next moves me to my very core. Footsteps in the snow, and they look fresh. The trail suggests someone must have hopped the fence and gone window to window to take a peek inside. Although disturbing, that seemed logical enough of a conclusion. Though how exactly this person got into my garage, I'm still not sure. At this point, I decided to call the cops. The cops showed up after about 30 minutes and walked around the place trying to find clues. Besides the footsteps, nothing worthwhile was found. However, one of the cops flashed his light over the fence into the neighbor's backyard, from where I thought the footsteps came into mine, but found no footsteps at all. I found that extremely worrying, but the cops seemed to explain it away by saying someone probably traversed the fence and landed straight into my yard. I wasn't buying it, but seeing as though nothing had been stolen or damaged, there was little the cops could do at this point. After they left, I went back inside my house, then stayed awake a while longer to see if anything else transpired. Luckily, the rest of the night went incident-free, and I ended up passing out on the living room couch shortly after. On the third night, after work, I came straight home, cooked myself a quick dinner, and then went to bed, or at least tried to sleep. That was around midnight, but what happened the previous 2 nights kept me up for a while. Finally, after staying up waiting to see if something had happened, I passed out at 2 a.m. This time the sound that awoke me was not the garage door opening, but the sound of the alarm. Maybe it was because I was on high alert, or just that I never was fully asleep. But the minute the alarm started ringing, I was on my feet, baseball bat in hand, prepared for an altercation. I had decided I'd let the alarm ring out without disturbing it, thinking the cops would come rushing to my aid. The alarm kept ringing for what seemed like an eternity. It had probably only been a couple of minutes in reality, and my heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it. That's when it occurred to me. I hadn't heard any sound coming from upstairs, no footsteps, no door opening or closing, no noise of a forced entry through a window or something like that. I mustered up all the bravery I could and ventured out of the basement onto the ground floor of the house. After switching on all the lights that were in my way, I called out to see if I could get a response from someone that was there. If there was actually someone at all. There was no indication that anything had happened though, and after turning off the alarm, I did a quick check of the doors and windows in the rest of the house. By this point, I was too scared to venture outside like previous nights, and only did so once the cops showed up 30 minutes later. It was the same officers. We did a quick check around the house to see if there was anything suspicious, and once again found footprints in the snow. But these were at a different place. These footsteps came across the front driveway and made their way to the side of the house, only stopping at a lower window that looks into the basement. I looked directly into my bedroom. By this point, I'm terrified, and once the cops leave, I decide to drive to a nearby hotel for the rest of the night. Once there, I contemplated calling my parents, but didn't want to stress them out during their much-needed vacation, and didn't want to seem like I was scared in front of my brother, who'll probably just make fun of me anyway. I decided I'd go back home, and the next day replace the batteries on all security system sensors, as I had managed to convince myself that was the problem. But it obviously doesn't explain the garage door opening randomly the 2 previous nights. The next night, I came home from work early, replaced the batteries of the sensors like I said I would, armed the security system and went to bed. This time, it was in my parents' room, which was on the top floor. I did not want to have some creep watching me while I slept, though I ended up not doing any sleeping at all at night, in any case. I had just brought my baseball bat up with me in case. Around 2:30 a.m. that night, while watching some Netflix, I hear the alarm go off once more. This was out of the blue, with no sounds or noises of forced entry or broken windows. I jump to my feet, pick up the baseball bat and start walking to the door, fully intending to leave the room and see what the hell was actually happening. But just as I got to the door, something inside told me that was a bad idea. I ended up locking the door instead. Mind you, the alarm is still going off, and I wasn't waiting 30 minutes again for the cops to show, and decided to dial 911 myself, using my cell phone. Still, there are no footsteps or any sounds of movement. I walk to the window to see if anyone's out here, but there's nothing. Just as the 911 operator picks up and begins asking me what my emergency is, I hear the sound of the doorknob rustling. Someone was trying to enter my room, but this was no ordinary rustling either. It was fast, relentless, and violent, almost as if the person trying to turn it were doing so at 100 miles an hour. I began yelling into my phone, "Someone is in my house trying to kill me." The operator tried asking me for more information, but I was in such a daze I just yelled out my address and told them to send the police right away. I threw the phone on my bed, grabbed my bat, gripping it as tightly as I could, waiting for whoever or whatever it was to finally break through and come and get to me. But just a few seconds later, the rustling stops. The alarm is still ringing, but I hear no sounds of footsteps nor movement, which at this point is making my imagination run wild, thinking of ghosts or other paranormal stuff. I was still standing there, bat in hand, waiting for some sort of dramatic entrance, but it never came. Instead, I heard the siren of 2 police cars make their way down the street and into my driveway, and at this point, I decided I'd rather jump out the window onto the garage than onto the driveway to be with the cops than stay another minute in the house alone. It didn't matter that it was freezing outside or if I wasn't wearing my jacket. I just wanted to leave. Once I broke the window and got on top of the garage, I managed to get the attention of the cops, who helped me down and then asked if that person was still inside. I was on the verge of tears by this point. I could only manage a nod. 3 of the officers went to check out the rest of the house, while 1 stayed with me. About 5 minutes later they returned, saying there were no signs of forced entry anywhere. I'm freaking out at this point, trying to figure out what the deal is with the doorknob upstairs. They then went inside the house to see or find any clues, and surprisingly, or not, found nothing. By this point, one of my neighbors, who's always been pretty helpful, noticed the commotion and decides to see what's happening. He must have noticed I wasn't wearing a jacket and brought me one. Meanwhile, the cops decide there's nothing more they can do and ask me to check with the security company about inspecting the system that's been installed, in case it was faulty. As for the doorknob, they seemed understandably skeptic, but seeing the state I was in at that point, decided not to probe me too much. The same officer offered me to let me crash on his couch for the night, as well as some extra food, and I was glad to not be sleeping in that house. The next morning over breakfast, my neighbor calls and tells me he has a security camera installed outside of his house, which actually captures a bit of my driveway, and asks if I'd want to watch it to get some closure. I say yes. So he pulls out his laptop and begins playing the video from the night before. What we saw scared the jeepers out of both of us, and I think his skepticism completely melted away. We saw that at around 2:15 a.m., a bald man wearing nothing but dark-colored clothes walks up the street and stops right in front of my driveway facing the house. He doesn't continue walking, so technically he was never on my property, but he was there nonetheless, just staring without any movement whatsoever, hands by his side. At 2:20, he starts rocking back and forth, still with his feet planted in the same spot, and he continues doing this for 10 minutes until 2:30, which is exactly when my alarm went off. He then turns around and walks back in the direction he came in, walking out of view. I was completely shaken upon seeing that footage. It was so unreal, and although I didn't believe in the paranormal or ghosts, that bit had me questioning everything I thought I knew. We checked the tapes from the previous 3 nights, and what I found was truly disturbing. The same person, bald, wearing dark clothes, walked up the street around 2:15, stopped in front of my driveway, and went through his usual routine. The second and third night this took place, I had come outside with a bat to investigate, but he would promptly leave at 2:30, basically minutes before I or the cops had a chance to see him. But what was truly strange was that in the video at least, he never once came to my backyard or even to the side of my house towards my basement window. He just stood at the foot of my driveway staring and swaying at the house, then left. I handed the recordings over to the cops, but unsurprisingly he was never caught or found. I called my brother that day and asked him to come and stay with me until our parents arrived. Thankfully nothing happened after that night, but it did leave some lasting mental scars, as I slept with all the lights on in my room for a year after that, and now I need a light to sleep, as well as leaving me with tons of questions. Who the hell was that? How did he/it know I was sleeping there that night? What was his deal with the alarm going off and the garage door opening out the blue? For the record, we had someone come and check up on the system, and it was supposedly working fine. And it did work fine after that night. And what of the snow prints? How the hell did that doorknob hold for as long as it did? Did the thing on the other side intend on coming in at all? What would have happened if it did? Two years ago, I was in my living room playing Call of Duty at about 1 a.m. when I heard 3 very loud gunshots. I played with the volume very low as my wife and kids were sleeping, so I immediately knew some stuff was going down. It had sounded like it came from my backyard, so I didn't know what to do. Then I heard someone jump my fence into my backyard, and I see a shadow walking slowly by my kitchen window. The lights were off in the kitchen, so they couldn't see me. I paused and couldn't move or breathe. Next thing I knew, he stops, then sprinted towards my front yard and out our front gate. I only lived 2 blocks from the police station, and the next thing I know, the cops started surrounding my house. I opened my door and tell them what happened, and immediately there was a helicopter searchlight on me. There were several cops in my backyard and in my front yard. I told them what happened, but they wouldn't tell me anything. What had happened, which I found out through the news, was that the guy had left the local bar with some younger kids to go to the liquor store behind my house. One thing had led to another, and they all started fighting. Some man driving by saw the whole thing, got out of his car to break it up, and the guy that was fighting the younger kids ended up stabbing one in the head and then shot the passerby 3 times in the chest, obviously killing him. This all happened directly behind my house. The kid survived and the shooter got away. They found out that the guy who got killed was driving home to Colorado and just stopped in our town trying to find a hotel for the night. I was home alone one evening and had gone to sleep for the night. I live with my significant other and 2 indoor cats, but she was out of state, traveling for business. I woke up in the middle of the night. I wasn't sure of the time, but it was completely dark because my body was freezing cold. I actually like it cool when I sleep, and usually have the temperature around 70 degrees or colder since I live in central Texas. But this was different. I was ice cold, but wrapped in blankets. It was the middle of summer and things aren't cold. When I grabbed my phone to look at the time, it seemed to be off, and when I pressed the on button it didn't respond. As I was half asleep, I shrugged this off. I walked out of my bedroom to go adjust the thermostat and noticed that the cats weren't around. This was weird. These furballs are always hanging out in the bed or around the bed. I walked to the thermostat, tried to adjust it, but the power to the thermostat was nil and the power to the house seemed to be off. I peeked out the upstairs window to see if any of my neighbors were having power issues. I noticed that all of their outdoor lights were working just fine. From the time I woke to this moment, had about 2 minutes between them. I decide to wander downstairs and grab some water, but am startled when I realize there is a glow of light coming from the first floor. The way my house is situated, I couldn't see the light until I had approached the stairs. I found this odd because the power seemed to be out just upstairs, which didn't make a lot of sense. When I started walking down the stairs, I began to hear a faint humming noise. The noise had a high pitch to it, with arbitrary pulses of low sound, almost like a muffled weed whacker that someone is throttling at random. As I continued to walk down the stairs, I spot a dark, slowly moving figure in the room, with light at the bottom of the stairs. The next step that I take feels like I walked off the side of a cliff or was sucked into the floor. That is the best way I can explain it, because I don't remember what happened after that moment. I just lost all feeling in my body. My next memory is waking up again to the sound of my phone's alarm. Everything seemed to be back to normal. I sat there in bed, cats being too lazy in bed next to me, and tried to think about the last 2-minute incident that happened in the middle of the night. I'm not a sleepwalker, and I definitely wasn't dreaming. My security system's app shows the time whenever the door is opened or closed, and I realized that my security system was disarmed on the app, and that the front door had been opened and closed several times through the night. I pulled up my security footage from the exterior cameras and was surprised to learn there was zero footage from the night. Like the motion sensors reacted to a random car driving by at 10 p.m. and then the next thing is another random car in the morning. So someone or something walked in and out of my front door and the cameras captured no footage. My neighbor across the street has a good security system that points at my house. So I asked if I could review the footage from his cameras and told him some made-up story about how I thought someone had broken into my truck. He said it was weird because when he pulled up the footage from that night, his cameras didn't record anything, just a time gap once again. My first thought was that I was sleepwalking and that my memory was a dream, but it just couldn't have been. When I looked out the window in the middle of the night, I distinctly recall a red pickup truck parked in the wrong direction in front of the neighbor's house. I always notice when cars are parked left wheel to the curb, because I've gotten a ticket for it in the past. The truck was not there before I went to sleep based on footage, but was there in the morning. So the truck was there when I saw it in the middle of the night, and I definitely woke up in the middle of the night, cold as ice. No cats, no working phone or thermostat. I saw the truck out the window and then got warped by something on the stairs. A couple of additional things were different in the house. The security system was disarmed and I definitely armed it before going to bed. The light was still on downstairs and that was absolutely off when I went up. My whole body smelled like burnt marshmallows. I know this is weird, but it really is how it smelled. And lastly, my 55-gallon fish tank that sits at the bottom of the stairs in the entryway was missing 2/3 of its water. Like seriously, where did 40 gallons of water go? The whole area around the tank was bone dry and the fish were fine. I think I was screwed over by some thirsty aliens. When I was about 25 or so, my boyfriend and I decided to live apart. We were broken up for a very short while, and when we got back together we just kept separate places for a long time. As a note, I highly recommend all women live on their own for at least a year before they decide to cohabitate. I learnt a lot of life lessons during this time. My apartment was pretty amazing for a young single woman who was supporting herself. Although it was a 1-bedroom, it boasted a separate office and dining room as well. Each room was a separate room with its own door. Except for the bathroom, the rooms didn't branch off a hallway. Instead, you went through each room separately to get through the place, and my bedroom was at the end. When you entered the apartment, the rooms went as follows. Living room to the office. You either turned right to a small hallway that led to the bedroom, bathroom branched off here, or you went straight ahead into the kitchen, then turned right to go into the dining room, then bedroom. The best feature of my apartment was accessible from the kitchen. The back door opened up onto a large covered balcony. The place was cheap, $450 a month in the year 2000, and all utilities paid. I even got free basic cable. The landlords were a rare find, elderly and sweet, and took care of any issues that came up. With one exception, my back door, the one leading to the balcony. It had no lock on it. Now it's actually mostly my fault that I didn't make it a priority to get it fixed. I really thought that I was pretty safe because the balcony had no steps leading down or anything, and the wall was sheer. The balcony was high up enough that a standard ladder wouldn't reach it, so if someone tried to enter, they'd have to be extremely determined. Now, my decorating tastes are a little boho, and I'm fond of stuff that sparkles and shines. My apartment reflected my tastes and was decorated with fairies and crystals and butterflies. I had sun catchers and wind chimes in the appropriate locations. A friend gave me a couple of sets of miniature fairy chimes as a gift, and as they were very small, I decided to hang them on each of my doors. I enjoyed the slight twinkling sound they made when the doors opened or closed. Thank God for my eclectic tastes. I'm sitting in the office playing some flash time wasters of a game on my computer when I hear the chimes on my balcony door. I assume I had failed to shut it completely and the wind had blown it open. So I jump up to close it again, and I come face to face with a skinny, shirtless, sweaty ginger dude with jailhouse tattoos all over his chest. He's obviously surprised to see me, and I'm scared but try not to show it. You hear all these stories of people getting severely beaten or even killed when interrupting a robbery. I'm surprised he didn't just knock me over the head with something and run. Luckily he didn't. "What the hell are you doing?" I say. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm here to do some contracting work on your apartment." "How did you get in?" "Is some dude here?" "Who?" "I work for some dude, and he told me I'd have to climb the porch. He said the back door would be unlocked." I look out. There's no ladder, rope, or anything to climb on. I'm thinking, who is this guy, Batman? I have no idea who some dude is, and no, there's no work scheduled for this apartment. Also, in case you haven't noticed, I gesture towards the balcony, this isn't a porch. As the ginger dude is mumbling again about how he was hired by some guy to work, I realize that he's not so steady on his feet and is also slurring his words a bit. Great. This guy is under the influence of something, and through his stupid, senseless mumbling, I finally just resort to screaming, "Get out!" over and over. He says he feels really bad about scaring me, and before I realize what's happening, he grips me in a smelly, sweaty hug. He goes out the door, and the second he's gone, I have a full-blown panic attack. I'm bent over, head between my knees, wondering faintly if I should call the police or someone when I hear a terrific crash from my living room area. As it turns out, the ginger dude had gone into another part of my building and climbed into the attic area. As he was poking around, he lost his footing. There are beams you have to step on to get across the attic, and had fallen through my ceiling. I stand in my living room and am looking at a pair of scrawny legs poking through my splendid ceiling. He pulls himself up in a high-pitched smart-ass kind of voice and calls out, "Excuse me!" This infuriates me, and being the smart, modern woman, I storm into the attic and confront him. He once again gives me this story about being hired to do work on the place, and I tell him he's full of shit. He holds his hands up in an appeasing manner and says, "Okay, what do you want from me?" I tell him what I want for him to do is go downstairs, sit on the curb, and wait for the police, because I'm calling them right now, and they're taking him to jail. When the police show up, he is sitting obediently on the curb, patiently awaiting his ride to the pokey. Turns out his girlfriend at the time was in the apartment next to me, and he thought he was breaking into her place. My landlord's got a new lock on that door in short order. But wait, folks, there's more. Eventually, I got called to testify in court against him, along with a number of other people whose homes he apparently invaded. I get approached by a Brittany in a teensy denim skirt, and this is the conversation that followed. Are you the girl whose apartment the ginger boy broke into? Yeah. I'm his ex. Oh. No, not your neighbor. I'm his baby mama. Yeah, she said that. Are you gonna press charges? Yes, I am. Well, I don't blame you. But I wanted to let you know that he has a 2-year-old and a baby on the way, so you might want to think about that. Why? He didn't think about it before he did what he did. He has kids to support? I just think you should think about it, that's all. Look, I appreciate your situation, but my situation? I got no situation. He never gave me nothing. He hasn't seen his children in months. Maybe you should think about that. As for me, I'll be pressing charges. Turns out, Ginger Boy had broken into multiple homes and actually attacked an elderly woman who happened to be home when he broke in. He got 5 years for breaking into my place. I'm not sure what else he got for the others. Maybe it was 5 years total, I really can't remember. The courthouse took a couple of hours, but I got a paid day from work because I was subpoenaed. I have no idea why he didn't attack me, like he did the elderly lady, but I feel extremely lucky, because usually stories like this don't end so well. It did, however, give me one hell of a story to share. I lived in an old shack-type house on 1/2 acre. It had 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The house was simple and small. The living room on the right, the kitchen, and a back door to the left. 2 bedrooms and the bathroom between them, and a door from the living room that went straight back into the 3rd bedroom. I filled that room with boxes of my things from storage, because there was no garage. I had quite a few friends from all walks of life. I wasn't working at the time, and they knew my door was always open just to say hi, stay for coffee, or play a few card games. It almost felt like my home was a hub for everyone to just leave your problems on the doorstep and relax for a moment. We even had a projector and would display movies some nights on the wall of this 2-story building next door if it was a fun time. Well, I never discriminate. If you are hungry or tired or needed a shower at my home, you're welcome. Be kind to me, I'll be kind to you, sort of thing. We even got raided a few times thinking we were selling drugs because of all of the activities going on, but they were sadly mistaken. One day a friend shows up, accompanied by this guy with very kind eyes, but he seemed very sad inside. He was hungry. I made him lunch. And he was a good conversationalist and we laughed for hours. My friend said that he didn't know the guy that well, but he seemed nice enough. He kept complimenting me, which of course made me feel uncomfortable, so I asked him to stop. He came back a few more times with his friends and once by himself. I didn't mind, I was never really alone with him. As time went on, he stopped coming over altogether, and I didn't think anything of this. People move on. After a while of living there, things started to feel strange in my home. Even when I was alone, I didn't feel like I was truly alone. Things started to feel off. Things were being moved. A few dishes were not where they were supposed to be in the cabinet. My bathroom mat was wet when I hadn't even showered, and I made sure every time I left things locked up. And I had the only key. My friends definitely thought I was losing it. It was close to Christmas, so we put a tree up, and everyone had a chance to put something on it when they came over. It was delightful, but soon after, the feelings of concern all flood back, when the candy canes started to disappear and the ornaments were rearranged daily. What was going on here? A few days later, we had a small get-together, just some close friends from out of town, and we all get a little bit tipsy. I told them they could sleep over. My friend Tom and his girlfriend in the other bedrooms, and his sister on the couch and in the living room. The next morning, I was first up. I went to make coffee and asked Tom's sister if she slept well. Not at all, that jerk. I laughed because I thought she was joking. She was alone in the room. Who could she be mad at? She said her brother Tom was snoring all night. Just then, Tom's girlfriend came out of the room saying, "What are you talking about? He doesn't snore, but I heard it too." I put my hands up and said, "My door was shut. I didn't hear anything." Later, we were eating breakfast, and Tom's sister asked him how he could eat so much with everything he ate while everyone was sleeping. We all looked at each other like she was crazy. "Sis, I didn't get out of bed last night." She argued that someone, a man, went to the kitchen and got food and then went back out, came back in and stood in front of the couch, sucking on a candy cane before going back to bed. He and his girlfriend insisted that it wasn't him. Okay, that was weird. Tom shared his concerns with me, being there alone, and to be honest, I was pretty freaked out at that point. Well, word got out that Tom was in town, so it wasn't before long that some friends came over to visit. They were only there for 30 minutes when Tom asked us all to go outside and check out something in his car. I was in the middle of something, but he put my arm in his hand and looked me straight in the eyes. "You have to see," while leading me to the door. Once we got outside, Tom turned to us and told us not to go inside, and two of his friends grabbed sticks and went back into my home with him. I heard yelling and a crash and ran to my door, but Tom's girlfriend stopped me. Soon after, they came out dragging a strange man with them. It was that guy with kind eyes. I didn't understand what was happening. Tom said he put two and two together with all the things I told him that were going on, and when he was standing by the bedroom door near the living room, he smelled urine. So he went around back and looked through the slats in the bedroom window and saw the man under my boxes hiding. He must have been eluding me for 2 weeks. The sheriffs were called, and they told Tom that they were looking for that guy for other crimes. To think the guy was just feet away from me, eating my food, watching me sleep, and God knows what he was doing when I wasn't home. What were his plans, and why was he there? After that day, I changed all the locks and got a dog. Thank you, Tom. I just got home from a reasonably big night out. It's 4:30 a.m. and stinking hot in this part of Australia. I walked in the door, opened the fridge, and was so happy to find 3 icy cold beers. I take 2 of them, walk upstairs to bed, and read and drink myself into a boozy sleep. The first issue. The beers are not twisty tops. They need a bottle opener, and after some sloppy drunken attempts using the handle of a drawer by my bedside table, I head back downstairs to get an actual bottle opener. I turn on the kitchen lights, which are so bright they make the space behind my eyes burn. I squint around to find the bottle opener, which I can't find, so I use the solid edge of a large kitchen knife. It's a risky choice, but the bottle cap is now off the beer, and I'm happy. I turn off the alien blinding kitchen light and head upstairs, but something through the front of my house that looks onto the street catches my eye. I stop at the bottom stair, and all the hairs on the back of my neck and arms stand. I turn my head slowly, and my eyes and brain are trying to make sense of what I'm looking at. It looks like a rain-drenched woman in a fancy white dress gazing at me through the window. Wait, it actually is. I pause and take the longest inhale of my life. She's glaring at me like she hates me. She has mascara running down her face, and she is drenched from the rain. Her arms are extended like she's leaning her head towards me. Her body language was trying to say, "Look at me. Look of what you've done." I'm crapping myself, but the rational side of my brain kicks in and I think, oh crap, does she need help? I slowly walk over to the window, her gaze still locked onto mine. We are now literally within a meter of each other, and I state loudly through the glass, "Are you okay? Do you need help? Is anyone with you?" Then it dawns on me my gate is locked, and there is an 8-foot-high fence which is very difficult to climb. How did she get in? She doesn't respond to my inquiry. She just keeps that hateful look in her eyes. We stood there looking at each other for another 30 seconds. I was looking around nervously, trying to make sense of this, and she was just glaring into my soul. And then she finally opened her mouth, as if to say something. But it wasn't words that came out of her. It was an insanely high-pitched meow. And then she started clawing at the window with her novelty-sized fingernails. What? I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. She clearly isn't well, not very well at all. Then in the background behind the fence, I see another woman of 20-something years, dressed in a short black club dress, with the glow of her phone lighting up her face. She sees the woman in white at my window and yells, "Michelle, that's the wrong house." The rain-soaked, nightmarish Catwoman's eyes go from "I hate you, I want you to die" to "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed." And she runs over to the fence, and impressively Army Commando flings herself over it. I can then hear a group of ladies pissing themselves laughing, saying how Jason's house is number 25, not 23. That poor guy is probably gonna call the cops now. All that I know is that I'm so happy that I was on the receiving end of that misdirected prank, and I don't have to be killed by a well-dressed hybrid cat demon woman. And now I have to go back down to the kitchen to open my other beer, but I'm still too afraid. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. Never underestimate the power of home security, and always, for the love of Pete, whoever Pete is, lock your doors. It could literally save your life, as we have found out in previous stories, not the ones tonight. If you liked what you heard, feel free to subscribe. It's free, and there are more horrors coming at you every night. If something horrible has happened to you, or terrifying, and you would like to share it, feel free to send me your story via Reddit or email. Links can be found in the description. But with that being said, it's time for me to sign off. But not without giving a huge thank you as always to my amazing patrons for your incredible generosity. By giving as little as $1 a month, you can really help the channel out, as well as receive a number of funky perks. But anyway, for now guys, I am going to sign off. Stay awesome, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.